Yeah, I would. Say I know it's coming out. Quarter soon. I'd be happy to put something in there, whatever you would like to add.
I bet you it's doubled.
I'll just say about Cali.
Not yet. We've had a oh, you were, yeah. Oh, you were.
Actually, I'm not gonna ask for it. I'm just gonna say, just let you know.
It's deep enough that you can write and very close to the ground. So it's just like we're in channel, right? So right around, so look at there's a bridge.
Right. You talking about lock off the surfboard or something? Yeah, that's a tool that you have to have. That's just a tool you have to have. Where you at? Okay. I don't know if there's one in the shop. There's two types of keys. There's one that has like a valve core remover, and there's one that has is round with a divot on it. Okay. I don't know if Adam has one on his desk or not. So
welcome back to the program. Everybody wants to take their seat. Remember your cell phones. So I have good news and bad news about this afternoon. We actually are going to be able to get a break now, but the bad news is because one of the flights for one of our speakers got canceled. But we'll manage this schedule well. The Congresswoman from Florida, Congresswoman Cameron, her flight got canceled, I think, because of the storm from where she was coming from. But that's okay. It'll give us a small break for me to step out and like run to the restroom this afternoon at some point, because I really wasn't looking forward to sitting here with you all from 1 to 5. So we'll have a little bit of a break. Right now, however, I want to introduce you to my next guest, who is one of the best governors in the country. You know, I'm biased for my own governor, but inarguably one of the greatest governors in the country, who a friend of mine actually refers to because of his fight with Disney as the Rat Slayer. It's been incredible. I hate to use the word holistically. It's just such one of those buzzy words, but I mean, balancing his state, which has a massive environmental concern that everybody left, right, and center cares about, from the Everglades to the freshwater springs to bringing in massive amounts of business, handling just this massive influx of people from all of these states they're fleeing, and then also having to deal with like Hurricane Debbie and then the inevitable Florida man. And he balances it all with grace and humor and is just such a great governor. It's my pleasure to introduce you to Governor Ron DeSantis.
It's great to be back in Georgia and all the accolades of Florida I'm proud of, but I grew up in Florida, born and raised, and we were for a long number of years the college football center of the universe. That is not true anymore. I am now standing in the college football center of the universe in the state of Georgia. And these things change. But so, as a conservative, you know, I understand my job is just as much to prevent bad ideas from going into place as it is to facilitate good. You want to do both, but you got to stop the bad stuff. So a couple years ago, I had some people come to me with an idea, and they said, Governor, we have calculated that we could make more money for the University of Florida if we moved the Florida-Georgia game from Jacksonville to a home-and-home series. And I said, that very well may be true, but I am not going to be the governor that loses the world's largest outdoor cocktail party.
I would be remiss that you started there, that y'all are losing such a great president at the University of Florida with former Senator Sass. That was a great pick, and just what you've done with colleges in Florida overall has been just tremendous to actually push back on so many of the far left academic issues that where college campuses around the country have just been tools of indoctrination and just forget about education.
So we have a radical idea that the tax dollars that Floridians pay should not go to fund universities that are hostile to our freedoms and way of life, and that they should actually fund institutions that are pursuing the classical mission of a university, pursuing truth, having high academic standards, and preparing our students to be citizens of our republic. And so what we've been able to do, so first of all, since I've been governor, we've not raised tuition. So tuition for in-state's about $6,300. Grandparents can actually qualify for in-state on behalf of their grandkids under certain circumstances. We're proud of that. We have Bright Future Scholarships, similar to what Georgia has, where good students go to school for free. One notch below that, you get 75% off tuition. So we're making it affordable. So you basically have no debt. But what we've said is, how does it get to where these universities are captured by the left? You can't just say we don't want it. There's reasons why. There's incentives built in. So we did a reform that all tenured professors must undergo review every 5 years and can be terminated for poor performance. And this isn't even apart from the indoctrination nonsense. You talk to anyone in those universities, probably the biggest deadweight cost is unproductive tenured faculty. So you want to be able to do this, but it also helps identify, hey, if you're there for politicking and not for academic rigor, we're going to do that. So we did that. That's now being done. There was just an article about UF that Ben Sass really did this to identify. So they've got like the bottom 20% that are going to be filtered out, but we have also empowered presidents of our universities, almost like free agency. There's someone good at Hillsdale or MIT, we give you a pot of money, just go hire them. Do not let the hiring be held captive by the current faculty. Why? Well, because if you're undercurrent in almost any university in this country, if you go in front of that faculty, if you don't toe the ideological line, are you going to get tenure? Probably not. In fact, I'd say 95% not. Well, now we don't have to worry about that. They see people that are talented, they bring them in. So we've brought in a lot of professors for our universities. And it's funny because we have this post-tenure review. People are being processed out. Some people have looked at what we've done at New College in Sarasota. This was like a small liberal arts college, publicly funded. I didn't even know what it was when I became governor. I remember the Speaker of the House came to me and said, Governor, I want to talk to you about New College. I was like, why do we need a new college? We have enough of them already. He's like, no, this place in Sarasota. I'm like, well, you tell me about it. It was like a Marxist commune. Left of the left, no grades, all this stuff. And look, if that's what you want to pursue, you have every right to do that, but not at the taxpayer's expense. So I put 7 conservatives on the board of trustees.
Turned it
I
into
put
Hillsdale
7
College.
conservatives on the board of trustees. They fired the president, hired a conservative president. They abolished the gender studies department. They were the first university in America to eliminate DE&I, and they reframed the mission of the college to be the nation's top publicly funded classical liberal arts college, similar to a Hillsdale College. And so when we did that, there were some, even though the enrollment was terrible, some of the students wanted to leave, but so many more wanted to apply. Some of the faculty wanted to leave. And honestly, they should have. They were not good fits from there. And so the media would be like, oh, there's a brain drain because some professors are leaving. Let me tell you, if Marxist professors are leaving the state of Florida, that is good for the state of Florida. That is not bad. The larger issue, though, is conservatives have worked hard on K-12. We have universal school choice. Hopefully Georgia will get there someday, some of these other states. But it's good. It's important. But you can be, and I have young, so we we are, and I was just telling Eric before he came out here, you know, we're in the last dog days of summer vacation. Next week, we have our daughter going to 2nd grade, our son going to 1st, and our youngest daughter going to pre-K4. We're ready for them to get back to school there. So we're very sensitive to K-12. It's important, but just think about, you're a parent. Maybe you have a great K-12 school. Maybe you're homeschooling. You're working hard to instill values. You do that for 18 years, and then your kids go to some university where they work to undo that with indoctrination. That is not good. So I think this higher education issue is critical. We are now, because of what's happened at Columbia and all this other stuff, you know, they tried to take over lawns at University of Florida, Florida State, all this stuff. They lasted 7 minutes and they got dragged out of there. We're not putting up with this. But part of the problem with our country and things that have gone wrong is as a result of all the nonsense that you've seen in these universities of the last 20, 25 years. You know, I was a blue-collar kid growing up in Florida. I was a baseball player, you know, so I ended up getting recruited to play baseball by schools like Princeton and Yale, and I had never been to New England before in my life. I remember showing up the first day of school like a good Floridian. I had flip-flops and jean shorts on and a t-shirt. That is not how these kids from the prep schools dressed or acted, so I was like a fish out of water. I didn't even know colleges were liberal when I went. I just was very, very wet when I read it. But I always said, it was shocking to me, and it's much worse now, but I was like, you know, when these kids get into the real world, none of this stuff is gonna fly, like this doesn't work. Well, now looking back, you know, the joke's been on me, because like all of that, yeah, it didn't happen right away, but it's now permeated corporate America, the bureaucracy, all these different things. So if we do not have a counter with higher education, we are ultimately going to lose, I think, a lot of the battles that lie ahead of us. And I'm just proud in Florida, no state has done more to reclaim the historic traditional mission of higher education than the state of Florida. We do not cede those institutions to the political left in this country.
It looks like the University of Florida is becoming a great baseball school.
Well, so we had Florida State and Florida, both Florida's UF 2023 number 2 in the nation, lost to LSU, who had Paul Skeens, who's one of the best pitchers in the big leagues already. And then this year, Florida and Florida State both made it to the Final Four. Baseball, neither of them made it to the championship. And University of Florida had a first-round pick. Florida State had 2 first-round picks. You know, I'm a baseball guy. I played all the way through college, so that's my love. But at the same time, I remember my first year as governor, when National Signing Day happened for the football recruits, I told my staff, give me letters for all the kids. I'm going to sign them letters saying congratulations. So they did. And we have a lot of great high school football in Florida, great talent. So I'm signing these letters, and I'm reading, Dear Johnny, congratulations on signing with the University of Georgia. Dear Michael, congratulations on signing with Alabama. Dear Johnny, congratulations on signing with Clemson. I'm like, wait a minute, why am I congratulating them for leaving the state of Florida? We used to keep all the blue chips in state now. So yeah, but we've got our state in terms of like big events. Just since I've been governor, we've hosted 2 Super Bowls. We've college football national championship. We got another one of those coming up. We have hockey Stanley Cups. I mean, like, who would have thought Florida would have that? I was just in Miami helping. They're building a big new soccer stadium. They have Messi down there. We're helping with some of the arteries and the roads to kind of go into that. So there's a lot going on in our state, and hopefully we can get back to where we're competitive in college football.
You bring up a sore subject for my son and Philip, who works for me, because they're both Tampa Bay Lightning fans. And for the life of me, I still can't understand why Florida has 2 ice hockey teams. But when I get emails and see people with Quebec license plates headed down to Florida for the winter, it kind of makes sense now why Florida has these great hockey teams.
So interesting fact. So I grew up in Dunedin, Florida, which is by Clearwater. It's west of Tampa. There in the Pinellas County on the peninsula. We were the spring training home of the Toronto Blue Jays. And one, it was just good because the city of Dunedin owned all those facilities. So as a high school baseball player, my home field was the Dunedin Blue Jays spring training stadium. That's where we practiced, that's where we played. And so I played 4 years Division I baseball all over the country, never played on a better field than my high school home stadium, which is really cool to be able to grow up. But I remember growing up as a kid, every February, you're out and about in Dunedin, and it was 50-50 whether the car in front of you would be a Florida license plate or an Ontario license plate. I mean, it was a lot of Canadians.
So we've got someone here from Canada, and he said in his email, leaving a question, he's one of the people who drives every year in winters in Florida, lives in Halifax apparently, is there for the summer, and he just wanted to ask his favorite American governor his opinion on his least favorite Canadian prime minister.
So all I can say is this. Justin Trudeau, since he has been Prime Minister of Canada, number of Stanley Cups for Canada. Governor Ron DeSantis, number of Stanley Cups for the state of Florida since I've been governor, 3.
On a serious note, you guys, Georgia, now the Carolinas, Virginia, have had to deal with Debbie. How has the recovery been for the state?
Well, we're proud of our storm response in Florida because, when I became governor, this is something we dealt with for many years. And I said, okay, and there have been a lot of strides made, particularly under Governor Bush, who had to deal with a lot. But I was like, okay, what can we do better? And so every time we get in these seasons, we're looking to do better. So my first thing as governor was like, we can't have situations where people are without power for weeks on end if we can help it. Now, sometimes the damage may be so bad, right? So we started pre-positioning linemen to be able to go. As soon as that storm passes, these guys are there connecting people. So Debbie hit the other day. The number of people without power in the state of Florida is effectively 0 as we sit here today. And that wasn't true in some of these other places that have been hit. Not that this was the Category 5, but being able to do that. So we were able to do that. Now there's some pockets of flooding. We may see some more because when Georgia gets a lot of rain in the south, it comes down to North Florida. So we're monitoring that, but we've been able to really lean in and have a very robust response. It's just something that we take a lot of pride in. We mobilized everyone the week before the storm, before it was even an organized storm, because we see, hey, there's a possibility, we do it. I'd rather have too many resources ready and get a better outcome than not have enough and end up getting a worse outcome. So we're going to do fine on it. Look, I don't want to have to get hit, but if I had to get hit with a Debbie every year, we can handle that. I mean, we're in really good shape. We'll see what happens for the rest of the hurricane season. But the Ian was a Category 5. We had over 3 million people restored with power within 72 hours. Like, that had never happened, anything like that before. We had entire bridges that were knocked out, taking you from mainland Lee County, Fort Myers, to some of these barrier islands, Sanibel and Pine Island. And, these are not state bridges, and so this is like a county deal, and they were basically being told, the residents and the people that have businesses, it's probably going to be 6 months before you're going to be able to get out there. Maybe you can take a boat or something like that. So these guys came to me. They're like, we can't do that. Like, our islands will die. Can you help us? And I'm like, all right, I'll help you. So I got my guys together. I was like, I want no bureaucracy. I want no red tape. We have these missions. We got to do it. So the Pine Island Bridge that they said was going to be out for months, we took it over. 3 days later, it was back open, reconstructed for business. Sanibel, 2 weeks after we took it over, it had 3 breaks in the causeway, repaired, back open for business, and that basically is the difference between those places being able to come back or basically just withering on the vine. So these things there's always something different about each one of them, but preparation is key, and then just being able to make decisions. I mean, like, some people are like so worried that they may make the wrong decision. When you're in this fog of a crisis, you may not make every great decision, but you got to just be decisive. You can always be able to shift resources or do what you need to do. So I think we're going to be fine, and we'll see what happens for the rest of the hurricane season.
Before I get into your thoughts on national waters, I really want to ask you this question. I've been thinking about how to ask you oftentimes questions in interviews you may not necessarily get. One of the things that always strikes me when I go to Florida, take the kids down there, you've got these enormous freshwater springs that come up everywhere. You've got the Everglades. You've got this tremendous environmentalism that Republicans often get knocked as mythology, that we're somehow bad for the environment. But you, as a conservative governor who supports free markets, have really done a good job of balancing business, commerce, trade, tourism, and also no degradation of the environment in Florida. How do you balance those concerns from a conservative perspective to ensure the environment in Florida is pristine, environmentalists love what's going on there, but also you're not sacrificing trade and industry, commerce, and tourism?
Well, fortunately in Florida, a lot of that's reinforcing, right? I mean, like, our economy is strong because we have great natural resources. We're the #1 boating state in the country, #1 fishing state in the country, and it's not even close. And people come for that. They come from all over the country. Heck, they come from all over the world to be able to do that in the state of Florida. And so our Everglades it's not a swamp. It's actually a river. It's a river of grass. And man created different types of blockages of the water for coming down for a variety of different reasons, but it over many decades starved that system of the water it needs, which is a natural filtration system. It's caused water to go in different directions that have caused problems. And so we basically set out when I became governor to restore the flow, to think about what God gave us and get back to that, and do it in a smart, cost-efficient, and an intelligent way. But that has helped our economy for what we're doing. You know, if you look at like Florida Bay, the fishing is better today than it was when I became governor. You look at what we've been able to do to combat algae and some of the things. You know, we've mitigated that to where, you know, things like red tide happen. That's just natural, but try mitigating the effects. So that's good for the hotels. It's good for our travel industry. It's good for our restaurants. It's good for all of that. So I just had to lay the marker down. Our party really wasn't leading in on it because I think they think, and I agree with some, I mean, like, when you hear things about environment, you think, hey, the left uses that to try to advance their agenda. They don't really care about the environment. They care about controlling your behavior. Amen. So I think there's a natural aversion when you see that, but that's not what we're doing. I'm not trying to control your behavior. I'm trying to restore the beauty of Florida, and we are doing it, but then let you enjoy it as a Floridian or as a tourist. I want more activity. I want people out and about. I want them doing that. So it's a different approach, and I think the left has given us an opening because their whole thing about the climate ideology, that's basically they want to impose very controlling, destructive policies on the American people. They tell you the world's going to end unless you adopt their entire political agenda. Gee, imagine how convenient that it just works out that way, right? You got to do everything they want, otherwise the world's going to end. So we've rejected that. In fact, we did an energy bill. Oh, the media got so mad at this. We did an energy bill this year that basically said the state of Florida, our energy policy is we want reliable energy and affordable energy. And we specifically said our policy should not be based on climate ideology. That causes people to pay more and it's less reliable. They got so mad about that. But if you think about it, part of the reason we're able to get the power on in Florida after a storm is because we've embraced reliable energy. And even though we've done that, our emissions are way down over the last 10, 20 years than what they were previously. So we're going about all this, I think, in a very sensible way. And that's part of the reason why we've gotten so much broad support in the state of Florida. All the different issues we face, you know, we're addressing every one. We're just doing it from a conservative perspective rather than adopting liberal policies.
So you mentioned the left wanting to control us. There's this governor you may have heard of from Minnesota who, while you were opening your state for COVID, was keeping his lockdown and also doing a rat line for neighbors to rat each other out. And I understand there are a lot of Floridians now who have Minnesota accents.
Yes. Well, that's the thing. I've known about Walls a long time because when people flee, they would tell me why they fled. They'd come up to me. I'd have strangers just give me like a big hug saying, thank you. We escaped from California, New York, but a lot of them escaped from Minnesota. And Minnesota has lost population since he's been governor. And so I think the policies have been very destructive when you're driving out people. But think about this shtick he's doing. I mean, this is just unbelievable. He will give this stump speech and he says, you know, our neighbors can do what they want. It's none of your damn business what your neighbor's doing. This from the guy that set up a COVID snitch line imploring Minnesotans to tattletale on their neighbors for leaving their house. What, to take the dog, to relieve the dog, then walk the dog, or go out and play shoot hoops or something? He wanted you reported to the authorities. That is not minding your own damn business. That is a total abuse of government power. And then he'll say things like, well, these Republicans are weird. This is a guy that used Minnesota tax dollars to put tampons in the boys' bathrooms throughout the schools of Minnesota. Are you kidding? And then he talks about trying to say, he's like, I want people to be able to, they make your own healthcare systems. Fine, yeah, I agree. But he's the one that mandated the experimental COVID mRNA shot. There was a lot of people that didn't want that, and he forced that on the state employees. And so this whole shtick is totally contradicted by the record. Now the media, they are going to present him as, oh, he's a coach, he's a veteran, all this. That's what they're going to do. They're not going to talk about these policies. And it's interesting, even when they have to address it. So this knock on him for putting the tampons in the boys' locker room, how the media is portraying that is Republicans criticizing Walsh for putting tampons in schools. They're omitting why we're so upset, why we think it's ridiculous, because he's putting it in the boys' bathroom. So they don't want to address the actual criticisms of it. I don't think ultimately these VPs probably, are going to affect the election, but how he's being presented versus the actual record, I mean, it's a stark contrast. And I've got people in Florida that live to tell the tales about what happened in the state of Minnesota. And it's interesting because you have some states in that same region, like Iowa's gaining population. They're doing very well. Minnesota's losing population. They're struggling. And it's all just a difference of philosophy and difference of policy. And that's a very stark contrast between those two states.
You've experienced this on the campaign trail in 23, 24, and it really has been remarkable how a press corps that put Joe Biden in a bubble wouldn't attack anyone who stated the obvious until they couldn't. Now doing this with Kamala Harris. There are so many conservative activists I talk to who says, well, we can't win, they're so out to get us, and yet look at you in the state of Florida, Republicans able to win. What do you tell conservatives who just feel like the deck is so stacked against us, we can't win?
Well, first of all, the deck is stacked. I don't whine about that. That's just the truth. We had Biden, and I've been dealing with Biden the whole time he's in. We have natural disasters. He's come to Florida. I've seen the decline. I saw him when he first took office 6 months in. He came down when we had a condo collapse in Florida. This was obvious, and yet, a day before that debate in June, if you had said Biden doesn't have the wits or the sanity to be president, forget about even now, but till he's 86, the corporate media in this country would have said you're a conspiracy theorist, that this is right-wing propaganda. Then he went on stage, and it was basically at that point, we ain't putting lipstick on that pig. Everyone knew. Right? And so then they had to say, okay, how are we going to do it? And so they basically worked to get him out of the race. And I've been predicting this for a long time. I thought actually the move to get him out was going to happen after the midterms, but I think what happened is there wasn't a red wave. And so he was able to say, wait a minute, I can beat these Republicans. There's no red wave. Inflation was 8%, border wide open, all the bad things we're talking about, and there was no red wave. But then when it got to the point here, he was going to lose, and so they did it. And so now, and I said this too, whoever they get, and Kamala is probably the best one for us. I mean, if I had to pick who to run against, I would rather them do her than some others, because I think some of the others would be stronger candidates. But they are manufacturing this candidacy out of whole cloth. They are trying to create this excitement. And look, the thing is sometimes that can create excitement. Sometimes it can create momentum. And so this is all manufactured. There's no there with Kamala. She doesn't answer questions for good reasons, because she'll talk about the passage of time and being unheard. I mean, it's just nonsense. And so that's it. But here's in Florida, no governor in this country faced more incoming than me from the corporate media. Not even close. And your governor's been hit, others, but it was relentless on me because one, I beat their rising superstar, Gillum, in 2018. They were very upset about that. And then two, I got in after winning a narrow race, and I said, you know what, I'm not trimming my sails. I'm going to go and I'm going to be bold, and we're going to really move this state. And then when COVID happened, they were so mad people were on the beaches. They said we were killing kids by mandating that schools be open for in-person instruction. All the way down the line, that was constant. And then we stood for re-election after having more incoming. And not only did we win re-election, we took a state that had traditionally delivered 1-point victories. Rick Scott's 2 governor's races, Obama winning the presidential in 2012, Donald Trump in 2016, and me in 2018, even less than 1%. And we won it by 20 points, 1.5 million votes. Like, no one thought that was possible. We had 300,000 more registered Democrats than Republicans in Florida, and Florida never had more R's than D's. By the time I got reelected, we had flipped that to 300,000 more R's than D's in the state of Florida, which is great, and that generated a 1.5 million vote margin because we won independents overwhelmingly, all these demographics. But just since my reelection, we've gone from 300,000 more registered R's than D's to now 1 million more registered R's than D's. 99% hostile media, denigrating Florida, attacking me, but also the state. And people, in the dark days of COVID, we were being pilloried, and yet people were coming. So what that tells me is that there is a desire for truth. It's not easy. There's a lot of static out there. But people do want to see the truth. And so we showed how it's done. Now, for the balance of this national campaign, they are going to act as an arm of the Harris-Walz campaign. That's what's going to happen. Look, the corporate media, it's a huge part of the Democratic Party. That's just what it is. And it's interesting because I think about how do you combat it. As a governor was a little easier because I can just go out and do things. And so people would see with their own eyes, well, hey, wait a minute, this guy saved my job, he did that. It's harder just as being a candidate. But I think to myself, the corporate press in this country has never had a lower approval rating amongst Americans than they do now. We have a fragmented media environment where you don't even need to deal with these people. You can get your news other places. And yet, even though the estimation of them is at rock bottom, even though there's so many other outlets, in some respects, these narratives are more powerful today than there ever have been. I think part of it is it's a little bit harder to counter. If they were doing narratives against Reagan in '84, there were like 5 television stations he could put ads, Morning in America, and just fight back. Well, now, it's harder to reach people. And so the stuff that gets into the zeitgeist gets there. So it's not easy to do, but ultimately, I think if you're standing for what's right, if you're standing for what's true, if you're making the case, there is a desire for truth out there. And this is a great test because they are taking somebody who nobody thought could do the job of president, and they're trying to create a cultural phenomenon around this candidate and around her running mate. And I think the American people are ultimately going to see through that. But make no mistake, I hear some of the Republicans whining about, they don't go after her. Oh, they're not going to do that. Like, just understand, they are not going to do that. They wanted Biden out, not because they didn't like Democrats, it's because they didn't think he could win. Yep. So they're now trying to engineer a victory. That's what they want to do. So just be prepared about doing that and go out and fight the good fight.
Last question for you. You've got small kids. You're in your second term in Florida. You see the lay of the landscape. What gives you hope about the country, your state, where we're headed?
Well, if you look at kind of the maladies around this country that we face, to me, it's all rooted in leftist ideology and the leftist agenda. And we've seen them overtake K-12 education with school unions. We've seen them overtake the bureaucracy, federal bureaucracy. We've seen them overtake even a lot of corporate America, all these different things. And it's almost like, if you're an American that just believes in those core American values, that these are timeless principles and enduring truths, it's like, where do you turn because you have all this? Well, Florida shows not only did we fight these people, we beat them on issue after issue. We beat the teachers' unions when it came to being open during COVID, for having universal school choice, and we even have paycheck protection for teacher union dues. They no more automatic deduction, and now you're in a situation where Miami-Dade teacher union doesn't have enough signing up, and they're going to be decertified.
All he does is win.
Yes, we beat Disney on woke agenda in schools and woke ideology. We've taken all the debt Florida's had from 1840s to the present. When I became governor, we've paid off 36% of it in just 5.5 years, and we have the lowest per capita debt in the entire country. So all these battles can be won. We've shown it can be won. When I was standing for election the first time in 18, people were saying Florida was about to become a blue state permanently, and that there's no way Republicans could win elections nationally because of that. Now, I turn on my, in 2020, I'm like putting things on for my kids, and I could not put on any cartoon without there being a Biden ad. Like, it was nonstop. Now in Florida, you don't have presidential campaign ads. I mean, some of the ones that may be bought nationally in cable, but like in terms of our local markets, Florida's off the board. So we showed it can be done, and I think it can be done throughout the United States. But as conservative people say, what does it mean to be conservative? And I kind of think about it because, like, on the one hand, I don't want to conserve the current state of things where we have woke corporations, indoctrinations in the schools, prosecutors letting criminals out of jail, all that. So I think what I think Florida represents and what we could do nationally is a great rediscovery where we're restoring the timeless truths that have made this country great. Because when we show fidelity to those founding principles, you got to apply it differently than James Madison did, or Lincoln, or Reagan, to new circumstances. But when we have fidelity to those founding principles, we do well as a country. These are not just timepieces, these are things that endure. We've lost that over recent years, but I absolutely think we've got a pathway to be able to get it back.
Couple of
I was the president too. That's how take his hand. You need to work that. It's pretty good.
Ladies and gentlemen, thanks again to Governor DeSantis for coming up, particularly in light of having the hurricane situation down in Florida and then being able to get up here. I appreciate that a ton. I got to tell you, my next guest is somebody I always hate to bother because he's bless you, and he winds up oftentimes reaching out to me because I don't like to bother people. And when I got started in politics and started writing at Red State, I got a copy of Russell Kirk's Conservative Mind in the mail with a note in it, and if you're gonna be a voice for conservatism, be sure what you believe. And it was from my next guest, who I had never met, went up to DC and spent time with him. And at the time, he was running the Republican Study Committee, which at the time was the conservative voice in Congress. And then he became a governor, and then he became vice president of the United States. And through it all, he's always been guided by his faith and by a real commitment to truth. And not his truth, but the truth. Like I say on the radio all the time, if Jesus says, I'm the way, the truth, and the life, then truth is objective and knowable. And he's always been committed to knowing not just Christ, but also real, objective, knowable truth, and grounding himself in the timeless principles of truth. And so he's never been willing to compromise on the principles that I think have guided the nation for so long. And it's just, I love being able to call him a friend, and also someone who regularly prays for my family, particularly for my wife. And that is the Vice President, Mike Pence.
Wow!
So I got to start with asking you how your vastly better half is.
Well, Karen sends her regards, probably looking on from our home in Indiana. And she's doing wonderful, mostly because in the last 3 years since I was with many of you. We have seen the birth of not one, not two, but three of the most beautiful granddaughters ever born in the history of the world. Karen is happy. We got one more on the way. Our son, who is just made major in the United States Marine Corps. He and his wife have two of our granddaughters stationed in Arizona, and then our daughter Charlotte, who's expecting, is married to one of my unworthy son-in-laws. And they have one and one on the way, and he's a fighter pilot in the United States Navy, flies the F-18, and they're stationed out there.
So let me get this question out of the way. As you assess what's happening in the country right now, how do you view the way the landscape is shaping for this presidential election?
Well, I have to tell you, we're living in a very challenging time in the life of this nation. I mean, I couldn't be more proud of the record of the Trump-Pence administration. And I want to thank the people in this room for the privilege of being your vice president. It was a great But to see the way Joe Biden and Kamala Harris not only have undone all the progress that we made at the border, in the economy, in our military, in the social fabric of the nation, and the peace across the world, but to literally see, beginning with that disastrous withdrawal in Afghanistan, how Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, it's important for people here and looking on to remember, she always said she was the last person in the room for every major decision. Joe Biden has weakened this country at home and abroad, and Kamala Harris owns the record of the Biden-Harris administration. And all these veterans. And but the way that disastrous withdrawal from Afghanistan happened, I've no doubt in my mind that it emboldened the enemies of freedom, with Russia surging into Ukraine with an unprovoked attack, the constant appeasement and kowtowing to Iran. And as we stand here today, we literally are waiting hour by hour for news of even a wider conflict in the region. The back and forth and support for Israel. If the world knows nothing else, the world should know this. America stands with Israel.
Yeah.
Also, this administration has literally, the Biden-Harris administration, after you net out inflation, has cut defense spending every year they've been in office. At a time that China's engaged in an unprecedented military buildup, continues to threaten Taiwan. And then here at home, of course, the gusher of spending that launched the worst inflation in 40 years, throwing aside every policy that we put into effect, including the Remain in Mexico policy that I negotiated on behalf of the president. Threw wide open our borders, 15 million people surging, crime wave in our major cities. I saw some people the other day who've defected to the other side who were wondering where I would come down in this campaign. Let me go on the record here at the gathering. I could never vote for Kamala Harris as President of the United States or Tim Walz as President. Period. And I think it's important that we understand exactly what's coming down the tracks from the other side. But in the same breath, I also think we also need to think about who we are as conservatives. I mean, I'm very humbled at that overly generous introduction, Eric, but you've known me a long time. So my days in Congress and as governor, and people who know me know I'm a conservative. I'm not in a bad mood about it. People who know my heart know that I'm a Christian, a conservative, and a Republican, but in that order. My faith is the most important thing in my life. The most important decision I ever made in my life was when I put my faith in Jesus Christ as my Lord and Savior.
Amen.
It was the voice of Ronald Reagan after he was elected President of the United States in 1980 that drew me to the conservative movement. I heard him speaking about the principles of a strong national defense, of American leadership in the world, of limited government, fiscal responsibility, and a commitment to traditional values and the right to life. And I joined the Reagan Revolution, and I've never looked back. So for me, while we have to make it clear to the American people what's wrong, what's failed about the Biden-Harris administration, the new Harris-Walz team, I think we have to make sure that we hew to our roots in this conservative movement. And for my part, I'm staying out of the presidential campaign for the reason that I just cannot endorse this growing abandonment of our allies on the world stage that's taken hold in parts of our party. I cannot endorse ignoring our national debt that reached $35 trillion just in the last week. I cannot support marginalizing the right to life in our party as we saw on the national platform. And between me and my former running mate, I cannot endorse President Trump's continuing assertion that I should have set aside my oath to support and defend the Constitution and acted in a way that would have overturned the election in January of 2021. That said, let me be clear. Republican primary voters have decided who they're for. I'm going to try and spend my energies in two ways. I want to make sure, I've debated Kamala Harris. I know her pretty well. It's a saying I saw in a movie not long ago that said, you don't know anybody really well till you fight them. We fought with about 50 million people watching us on national television. Some people think I did all right that night. The truth is, we've got to hold them accountable, make sure the American people know what they're offering. But I'm going to spend my energies on what we're for, because I think that's just as important. Ronald Reagan said years ago, we need to paint in bold colors and not in pastels. We do well, I think, as we did in our 4 years, as we did in our campaigns. We offered a clear, conservative alternative to the Democrats' vision for America. And in 2016, we won, and in 4 short years, we changed the country. And I think now more than ever, we need to hew to our roots. Stand with principle on the conservative agenda. That's how we'll not just win elections, but we'll win a boundless future for the American people.
When you left office, I was asked in an interview what I thought your future would be, and I said my preference would be, if I could pick your future, would be the voice and the conscience of the conservative movement that I felt like was missing. And here you are, I think, now with what you're doing in Washington, where you are. And my frustration, I think, with a lot of the conservative movement is how we are forgetting the tried and the true, and we're getting distracted by shiny objects that lure us in and never seem to work.
Well, it's one of the reasons I'm an Erick Erickson fan. Anybody else there with me?
Yeah!
I think what it means to be a conservative is to stand your ground and to stand on principle. And that's what you do on the airwaves every day without apology. And I'm grateful for that. And if I could play that role in the days ahead, it'd be my great honor to do it. And not for my sake, though, but really for the sake of the country. I think we're living in a time very similar. The Bible says there's nothing new under the sun. What it is now has been before, right? And some of you aren't old enough to remember the 1970s, but I am. And I have to tell you, we had a president in 1978, Jimmy Carter, who gave what he was famously called the malaise speech, in which he told the American people things are bad. Long gas lines, energy shortages, record inflation. And President Carter told the American people they're bad now and they're just going to stay bad. And then the American people started listening to someone who had taken a run at the presidency a few years earlier, come up short in the Republican nomination. But he was someone that was talking about standing without apology on a conservative agenda. Ronald Reagan wins the nomination. He goes on to win the election, and there he stands in his first inaugural address. And he said, He spoke of an optimistic view of the future, but he said something to the effect of, and why shouldn't we dream great dreams? After all, we're Americans. And everybody was standing a little taller, everybody was feeling better. It reminded me for all the world, like 2017, when the country had the same sense. We set aside 8 years of the failed Obama-Biden administration, and we cut taxes, rolled back regulation, we secured our border, rebuilt our military, and appointed 3 conservatives to the Supreme Court of the United States that have created a But we didn't hesitate on those things. We were clear. We offered a clear choice. And for my part, I mean, there's a lot of talk about what the agenda of a future Trump administration should be. I'm thinking of launching Project 2017.
Well done.
Why don't we just go back to what we did before? I mean, in that campaign when I ran for president last year, Eric, last time I was here at the gathering was in that campaign. I was telling people, my concern was that not only the former president, but others in the field were actually not running on the agenda that we governed on. I gave a speech in New Hampshire at St. Anselm College entitled A New Republican Time for Choosing, where I warned against the Republican Party moving away from a conservative agenda and embracing what I call a populism unmoored to conservative principle. And I must tell you that all the way through the development of the Republican platform recently, I've seen that take place. Now, I should mention, because this is my first time in a public forum to address it, I thank God that President Donald Trump was spared in Butler, Pennsylvania. Him and I were in a plane, we just landed, and I got a text from someone watching it in real time. It took my breath away when I heard of the shot had come from 150 yards away, having lived with Secret Service for 4 years. I couldn't believe it. But I also knew that while the president had stood, and I truly do, I wasn't surprised, but I truly admired the way the president stood up and raised his fist and walked off that stage. I just reached over on that airplane, I grabbed Karen's hand, and I said, we're going to pray right now. Because while they were reporting that he had gotten off safe, I knew Reagan didn't know he was shot when they put him in the limo. And we just prayed earnestly, and we urged people around the country to pray. And I understand that shaped the environment going into the development of the platform, which would be minted a couple days later. But you know, I have to tell you that the fact that we have a platform that removed 50 years of pro-life language, made no mention of the national debt, advocated massive taxes at our borders, and abandoning commitments that we have to allies around the world was deeply troubling and deeply disappointing. But I honestly believe that, make no mistake about it, that you've got people from all over the country here and people watching all over the country. We can help our candidates at every level by speaking the truth to them respectfully. I have some familiarity with that. I did it for 4 years at the White House. I lost count probably, Eric, of the number of times that the president had me seated. I'd always sit at the same spot, immediately to the right of the Resolute desk. The president had a big bullpen of people in, and I never gave my opinion to the president, except on a few occasions, in front of anybody else. I thought as vice president I owed him my opinion, but in private. Because unless it was a matter of moral or constitutional principle, whatever the president decided was the right decision, right? That's the role of the vice president. But I lost count of the number of times the president would kind of look over at me when somebody was making a pitch about one thing or another. And he'd look at me and I'd just kind of go.
What did he do?
He'd say, oh, well, let's talk later. I mean, you all can play that role. Look, President Donald Trump was not only my president, he was my friend for 4 years. It's part of what made the way our administration ended much more difficult. Because we developed a close working relationship. And I say before, I'll say again, I'm incredibly proud of what we accomplished together for the American people. Is that relationship works? I do know the president, while his favorite term is common sense. It really is. He's not someone that necessarily feels drawn to the term conservative. It's not a part of his lexicon, if you will. But he listens. And I saw the way the president listened intently as leaders came in to speak about the right to life, as leaders came in to speak about the importance of broad-based tax relief. I mean, we have voices in our party who are talking about raising taxes when the Trump-Pence tax cuts lapse at the end of 2025. They're talking about raising corporate taxes. And I get it. It's all the frustration with woke corporate America. I understand it. I share the same frustration. I wrote the first editorial in the Wall Street Journal calling out ESG in the spring of 2021. And there's a great op-ed in the paper today on this issue. We've made great progress pushing back on woke America because the American people have stood up and pushed back. But I want to tell you that this is a time when the ticket is still forming. I will tell you, I'm encouraged by some movement that I've seen. I heard the president recently not only reject raising corporate taxes, but he called for moving the corporate tax rate to 15%, which would put us in a truly competitive environment in the world. But I just never underestimate the power of the voice of the American people and leaders in this movement to come alongside and encourage the president, and if nothing else, let's how about we just govern the way we governed for 4 years? And created 7 million good-paying jobs, reduced illegal immigration at our southern border by 90%, stood with our allies, stood up to our enemies, and put justices on the Supreme Court that sent Roe versus Wade to the ash heap of history where it belongs.
Again, I feel compelled to say that never has Mike Pence ever asked in advance a preview of questions, and so I'm going to throw you one wild card that I know you can completely take on. At the Republican convention, there was a statement J.D. Vance made about the nation being, some people say it's a nation of ideas, but it's a nation, blood, soil, people die for the nation. And then Joe Biden, bless you, gave a speech. He talked about actually America is this idea. And it seems like conservatives have always been able to balance that it's both. We are a physical nation of people, blood and soil, but we also are an idea that other people die trying to get to. And how we should balance what America is.
Well, I think America is, with maybe one exception, the only nation on earth that was birthed with the notion that our rights don't come from a sovereign. They don't come from a charter. That we are endowed by our Creator with inalienable rights. And we put that on paper. And we fought a war. And we won a war. And I would tell you that if next time you see me, you'll have to call me professor, maybe, because I'm going to be teaching a college course this fall. at a great Christian college called Grove City College in Pennsylvania. But we're going to talk about civics and citizenship. Because if there ever was a time that we ought to communicate to the rising generation, you are not an American because of where you were born. You are not an American because of your ethnicity. You are not an American because of who you're related to. If you are a citizen of this nation, you are an American because you believe in a set of principles and ideals that are enshrined in the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution of the United States of America. And it's also, you know, it's, I was listening to Ron DeSantis back there. I wish he'd show more energy. Did a great job. You asked him a question at the end, where's hope comes from? And I know I'm the only thing standing in between you all and lunch. And I hope to get a chance to visit with a lot of you. But I'm very optimistic about the future. And I hope you are too. Because look, the failed leadership in the White House today, this will pass. But principles remain if we hold to them. And if we hold the leaders of our party to them, that not only will we win, but America will win. I mean, I don't stand for these things because I think they're good for Republicans. I actually started in politics as a Democrat. But I knew when I listened to Ronald Reagan, I knew those are the values that I was raised to believe in by my Irish immigrant grandfather, by my combat veteran dad. These are the things that I knew just as an American were in my heart. And I would tell you this by way of encouraging each one of you. Just be confident about the future, even in these tumultuous days and frustrating days where it seems like you turn on the television with a stick every morning. You don't even know what's going to be there, right? In all my years in public life, and my 4 years as your vice president, I can honestly tell you, my opinion of government bureaucracy went down. But my opinion of the American people went up every day. I mean, I've seen our soldiers downrange. I have visited communities, including in this state, beset by natural disaster. I've walked among church members who lived through the most heinous violence. And through it all, I've seen the goodness and the courage and the generosity of the American people writ large. I mean, the truth is, this big storm just rolled through Florida. I know the governor and the First Lady. How great is Governor Brian Kemp? Can I just get to visit and to see storm damage, and I guarantee you the only thing you won't be able to find anywhere in the country where there's a natural disaster, hurricane, storm, flooding, tornado, wildfire, the only thing you won't be able to find in that area after the tempest passes is a parking space. Because when things go wrong, Americans come from everywhere. They load up the minivan with coolers full of water and food, and they just drive. And they pull up to homes of people they've never met before and will never see again and help put their lives back together. I just want to tell you, the American people are the most generous, principled, innovative, courageous people the world has ever known. And someday soon, we're going to have government as good as our people again. Have faith in the American people, in those charters that I just referred to. And finally, have faith in Him that has ever guided this nation. that speech that I gave back in September, there's a verse in Jeremiah, chapter 6, verse 16, that I think should be a watchword to conservatives today. Essentially says, stand at the crossroads and look. Find the ancient path and walk in that way, and you'll find rest for your souls. Now, I'm not saying that we should go back to the leadership of the past, but we should cling to those principles of freedom and limited government and traditional values of life and family that represent the wellspring of the strength of our nation. And we should trust Him who has ever guided and articulated those ideals to the American people. With faith in Him and faith in all of you, I know the best days for the greatest nation on earth are yet to come. So help us God.
Kind of overwhelmed. I think we have lunch outside before we get there. Find my handy guide. Yes. So my buddy PJ Ring Digital and David with Nicholas Wealth Management are sponsoring our lunch. We couldn't do this event without them. They're here. They're great guys, great companies, and again, they step forward to help make this lunch possible for you guys. One of the things that we really wanted to do to make it easy and efficient instead of having people wander off and come back was to be able to do this here with you guys. So I hope you enjoy your lunch. In an hour, Governor Doug Ducey of Arizona is going to be here, Congressman Kevin Hern, Sam Brown, who's running in Nevada. We have a great pickup for the U.S. Senate in Nevada, a compelling story, an amazing candidate. Mitch McConnell, the Senate Republican leader, a panel discussion with the Advancing American Freedom Foundation, which is Vice President Pence's group. Governor Kevin Stitt of Oklahoma is going to be here, and Jeremy Hunt from Veterans on Duty this afternoon. But let's take a break so you guys can get some lunch. I got to, believe it or not, run to a meeting, and then I will see you all back here in an hour. Thank you.
All right. Head to the slop buffet.